You turn your camera off.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Blueprints for Business. We are excited to have everybody here today. We've got a phenomenal topic. Everybody, please feel free to bring those cameras back on and we'll get started for the day. So we have Donnie and Elisa here to tell us all about cybersecurity. When I was talking to you guys about it, what really grabbed my attention is the process, the information you have about it, number one, but also the fact you offer the do it yourself, do it with me, or do it for me kind of a concept, which is vital, I think, because so many of us have different methods of how we want to approach this. But before we get started there, I'd like to say hello to Richard. Richard, how are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. This is the last work thing that I will do for the next week. I am getting ready to see so many of my friends at Appy Camp, which starts on Sunday. Very excited. I'm getting there a day early. I'm going to get a massage in. You'll be traveling there, I think, on Sunday, as well as Linda and Shannon and several others. So very excited about that. And I've only done 3 repackings of the initial packing once I got all my clothes organized for the trip. So
he organizes his clothes.
Yes. And as always, we like to start off by thanking Fordley for sponsoring this show. It's been very fun over the last few months to be able to continue to do these and watch as the group continues to grow. So thank you, Jane, with Fordley. Really appreciate you guys' continued support. And I would like to quickly open it up to Donnie and Lisa, for you guys to please introduce yourself and your company, because I want to do it right, and I won't do it justice. Donnie, how about you first?
Thank you, and thank you. I'm really sad now because I was supposed to go to Appy Camp, but I have to speak at another conference next week, so I won't see all of you. I could have seen all of you in person. But my name is Donnie, so I'm a non-traditional CPA. And by that, I don't do audit, tax, or bookkeeping work anymore. What I do is Elisa is a colleague of mine, and we run a non-traditional accounting firm. We work with other businesses as well as other firms on their business transformations. And that can come in kind of 2 things. One is it's innovation. Most people think of that as tech, but it's also process changes and business practices changes. And we balance that innovation with risk. And so, of course, with tech, it's cybersecurity risk. And that's partly why we're here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Elisa, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Elisa Nishimoto. I've actually been with ITK for 14 years now. And I've been working primarily with the CPA firms recently around their cybersecurity, including the package that we'll probably talk about today. So meeting with them on understanding what their concerns are around cybersecurity, as well as any of the challenges that they're having and trying to find the best solution for them.
Thank you very much. Now, Richard, as I look down, as you can probably tell, Linda and I are in a different environment at the moment. So if I'm looking down, I'm getting my phone set up to keep comments from social media coming in. I know you had a question you wanted to start off by asking, my friend.
absolutely, I do. So I've been seeing a lot of chatter on Facebook and on Twitter when people are learning about Forwardly. And one of the elephant in the room type questions is, it's free. How can it be free? How do you make money forwardly? And so I said, Jane, we need to address that. We need to bring it up. It's the elephant in the room. A lot of people feel like they're the product if there's a free thing going on. Jane, why don't you address that straight? I don't want to say straight from the horse's mouth, but straight from forward.
Kind of just did say that. Yeah.
Straight from the Jane's mouth.
Yeah.
Straight from the Jane's mouth. Yeah, I mean, it's a question we get a lot. Honestly, the first time we were at a trade show, I swear the first person that walked up to the booth took one look at it and was like, this sounds too good to be true. Are you a scam? And I was like, the first person said this. No, we need to charge for the things that we don't charge for. We do accept, like, there are fees attached to our product. We try and make our fees super, super obvious. You only pay to receive payment, and only when it's an instant payment. If you're not receiving the payment through the fastest payment rails in the United States within 60 seconds, you're not paying a fee. If you do receive it within that, within that super ultra fast payment rail, it comes in at a 1% fee capped at $10.
Beautiful.
So super, super simple. And then that's how we make our money. It's a volume game. The other thing is we do credit cards as well. So if you're paying with a credit card, then sometimes the merchant will pass the fees onto you, and sometimes the merchant will keep the fees. We do make a small percentage of the 2.99% we charge for credit card fees as well. So
that's paid by the credit card company. That's on the back end, right?
So it depends. So yeah, when you're accepting payment on Forwardly with a credit card, you can either choose to pay the fees yourself and then they'll be added to the transaction. Or you can choose to, like, we'll take them out of the transaction, or you can choose to pass them to your clients, at which point they'll be added to the transaction.
Beautiful.
I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Makes total sense. And thank you, because I'm tired of answering the question when people are asking it. So glad we got it out there. Not a scam. That's the bottom line. And definitely they do make money, and they do make money on things that are appropriate to make money on. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Happy to help, and always around to answer questions.
So real quickly, I want to say hi to Rich Kane and Jeff Weathers that are watching us also on Facebook. Hello, everybody. And I want to ask everybody a question, and please be honest. Is your cybersecurity like legit? If it isn't, raise your hand.
Yeah, no clue.
You guys are all doing that good with it? Okay. So I'm going to wrap myself out. I am currently at a beautiful hotel in Arizona, and I'm using the hotel's internet. I'm probably not supposed to be doing that, right, guys? What would you guys say? What's the best practices when it comes to cybersecurity nowadays? Donnie,
Donnie, why don't you take that?
yeah.
So I think really in general, it's really about knowing the content that you're working with, and purpose using kind of a generic word there, and where you're at. So for example, you just said you're ratting yourself out because you're on hotel Wi-Fi. Well, we're not right now dealing with any personally identifiable information or PII, or hopefully you're not while you're on there. And so, when we look at that, we go, well, that's actually pretty safe.
Okay.
There's not a lot of risk there. Maybe I'll flip that. There's not a lot of risk there. If we were on a client call, you were discussing my tax returns, and we just talked with Forwardly, like, you're giving me your credit card number over this, well, then I might be a little more worried, right? So security really is about context.
Okay. So no birthdays given today, no social numbers, that type of stuff. We're leaving that off. Got it. Okay.
I like the way you frame that. It's about context. It's about context and risk, really, isn't it? So, Donnie, you said that you have a service where you go in and you look at security. What's the first thing that you look at when you're doing an overall evaluation?
Actually, that one I'm going to pass to Elisa, because Elisa's the one that actually does it. So I usually do it with our bigger client. Elisa's the one that does it with all of our small firms, and we've got sole proprietors all the way through 50-person firms. But Elisa, why don't you share kind of the approach?
Okay, yeah, sure. So typically a firm will reach out because they're really worried, right, about their security. They want to make sure their data stays secure for their clients, and they're not sure of the best way to basically put that in place. A lot of times they'll watch Donnie's webinars and get scared. So he'll scare them all, and then they'll come to us. So when I meet with them, I typically get an understanding of what they actually use and have in place. So I go, how do you keep your machines up to date, for example? What kind of antivirus are you using? Do you do any type of testing or training for phishing, right? Because phishing emails are everywhere these days. And what do you use for your backup? Like, what if something happens? Do you have a backup of your data and things like that? And then in a lot of cases, they'll also ask about the IT policy as well, which we align with all of the cybersecurity solutions. So once I get that understanding of what they have in place, then I can identify gaps, like password management is an example where a lot of people, they have it in their head, or they have it on a piece of paper or a sticky note or a spreadsheet, you know, all no-nos. So like, okay, that's okay, but not the recommended, you know, approach to maintaining your passwords, for example. So I'll give recommendations around that, like a password management solution in that case. Yeah, and then based on that, we'll just kind of talk through, you know, any other challenges they're having or questions around cybersecurity, and just try my best to answer those.
So I know a lot of solopreneurs who are very in tune with security on a surface level. But at the same time, they're also the ones that, for whatever reason, will not necessarily install the latest security update for Windows or for the Mac because they've got 15 tabs open and they don't want to close them. And they'll wait weeks at a time sometimes. How do you address issues like that where the security of the moment that typically needs to be updated is not getting updated in real time? Are they opening themselves up to big security risks when a security update comes out, say, on Microsoft Tuesday, and they don't update it, you know, for 14 days, 15 days? What do you think, Elisa?
So I think they're definitely opening themselves up to risk. The conversations that I've had are actually firms that are interested in not doing that type of behavior because they don't want that risk, right? They want to make sure that they're not opening themselves up to a potential, you know, data breach or a hacker breaking in. So the solution that we provide is actually more of a proactive type tool. So instead of them having to, because typically with the souls that I've met with, they will do the automatic Windows updates, or you know, they'll manually run those, which is okay. But then a more proactive approach is preferred because something might be happening right with their machines, or maybe there's a certain patch that should be tested first before it's rolled out because it might potentially break something. So that's the solution that we provide, so more of a proactive rather than a reactive. And it seems like a lot of firms are interested in that.
I know a lot of firms are definitely interested in it. I also know a lot of people kind of are like, oh, I don't want to close these tabs right now. That's a big issue. I see it a lot. I definitely am in the same boat that you are. It's like, oh no, close that hole right now, and get away from that. So what are the, you know, for the folks that are here in the audience, what's the best piece of advice that you've got for just keeping yourself secure if you don't have a company watching out for you in the background? Either one of you. Donnie, Elisa, either one.
I was going to jump in on that because the situation you just described is what we would call bad behavior, right? So we cannot fix bad behavior. That's something that the individual, like each of us, has to recognize that we are responsible for protecting our clients' information and ensuring that they are not subject. Because it's, yes, we as a firm are impacted, but I always think we got to think about our clients. Think about all the clients that you serve, all the social security numbers that you have, all the credit card numbers that you have, all the bank routing numbers, especially if you guys are doing tax, because I know some of you here do tax, right? Those are all data that's at risk. And so if you're not taking the steps to protect your clients, and if you willingly, as Richard has described, are actually saying, well, I'm not going to update, if it ever came to litigation, what they're going to do is they'll put someone, I'm going to say like me because I don't do this type of work, but they'll put someone like me on there that's going to say, the best practice is this. You should be updating every week. You should be doing all this stuff. and they're gonna put you on the stand and say, "Did you do that?" And you're gonna have to sit there and go, "No." And why didn't you do that? Well, I didn't want to close my tabs. And think about how that's going to look to a jury, right, of our peers per se,
Okay.
when that litigation comes across. So that's part of it. And I hate to invoke fear, because part of the reason we actually started working on this stuff was I didn't like that fear was being used so much. What we see a lot is the IT consultants. I put that in air quotes because we see them coming in and they run something on your system and they go, "Look at all these red flags that it showed." And this is why in the beginning I started with the risk. We come back and look at it and go, "Well, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. This one matters because there actually is risk there for the way that we run our firm or for what we do for our clients." So I think just to level set on some of the thinking, right? In the end, it comes down to individual accountability, whether it's you as the firm owner, whether you have staff and you're getting your staff to comply, that's part of that. So what we try to do is really two things. It's a mix of education. So let's help you understand the risk. Let's put it in layman's terms, per se. And then let's give you the tools that normally are actually only available to large companies. What we do is when we see a group of clients, in this case, we already had a group of clients that was in need. I didn't see any of the IT companies stepping up to say, we're going to help small, even solopreneurs. They're all like, "Well, we need like 10 people, we need 15 people, right, to buy into these." We got a group together and we said, "Hey, are you all willing to commit to buying this? If you do, we will buy it in bulk and then help get it out to everyone and help you understand." And so that's kind of our approach to this. It's a little more help you help yourself. And Matthew actually started off with that. Like that was that's part of this model is you don't have to pay us to do everything. You might need to pay us to help you get it in place. After that, it comes back to you and you being able to monitor it on your own.
So I'd like to dive, Christy, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about your comment there, but before, real quickly, I do have a question. While we were on mute a little bit a moment ago, Linda took the opportunity to point out, well, that's why she uses a Mac instead of a PC. So I'm wondering, like, is that really, security is the same for Mac versus PC, for clicking links, doing this, doing that, everything else, right? I mean, it still has to have updates. Is there a major difference between the two? And then Christy, after that, I'd love to hear, as you were talking about your role, because it super aligns with this.
So the Mac, I'm safer on the Mac has quickly become a myth, primarily because the primary attack vector right now is phishing attacks. And phishing attacks occur against your email address, which you're normally logging onto via the web, right? So that's the fallacy that's occurring. Even before phishing really kind of took off when we got into the pandemic, like it skyrocketed during the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, we were already seeing the trend where before we would see, I think it was like 5 or 10% of data breaches are coming from Macs. We were already seeing that creep up to 15 to 20%. Part of that is because Macs previously were not significantly used within the business. And when you look at the grand scheme of who's handling this type of information, it's businesses. And so we didn't see Macs because Macs weren't in business. Macs becoming more prevalent in business now have become more of an actual target. And so we're seeing Macs get more exposed, even the Macs themselves becoming more exposed too. But in our context, in accounting firms and tax firms, what we're normally seeing is email breaches. And so yes, you might be a little more safe, but the primary attack is email breach, and Mac doesn't protect you from that. Sorry.
We'll just back that last 10 seconds off there, but no, okay, thank you, I appreciate it. It's the constant battle, Mac versus PC in my world. But so Christy, your comment, and wanted to say hi also to Sarah. It's good to see you on here as well. Donna, good to see you here also. And I liked your comment, Donna, that you said earlier, which was no outside firm can protect against bad behavior, 100%. So, Christy, can
Yeah.
you tell us about your stuff, please?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I want to say hi to Donnie and Elisa. I've actually worked with them on previous engagements, and we have a client in common, so I get to hang out with them very often. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important to partner with an external IT firm. I mean, I'm the tech nerd of High Rock, but I don't know all there is to know about hardware, about certain pieces of software. And so I am regularly relying on my IT support to help me help the team. And then I become kind of a liaison. Now I know that in my particular role, this role isn't in everybody's firm, and sometimes this hat falls to you as an individual. I've been there. But essentially it's all about, making sure that you have documented processes, you've set up policies and procedures for what the team is supposed to be doing, especially if they're remote and they're not, in an office environment. Because a lot of those things is just a matter of, I'm even guilty of walking away from my computer during the day and, taking a quick break and leaving everything unlocked. Well, for the most part, I'm the only one here during the day, but occasionally my daughter's homesick. She's 15. She's tech savvy and can navigate. She wanted to, be nefarious, she could, and trust is not an internal control. So, we do a lot of documenting of the process, working with our IT firm. We actually have found, and Donnie, you might be able to speak to this. There is like a phishing test like software where you can send phony phishing attempts out to your team to see if they actually will click on them, and then use that as it's almost like a fire drill kind of situation. Like, ooh, you clicked it, we need to follow up with you deeper and maybe do a big deeper dive. And we've also just asked our IT teams to provide any training, videos, links, otherwise, that we can provide to our teams when they're first onboarding, so that they can be made aware right up front. And if you can show that you've done your due diligence in making sure that you're keeping things as secure as possible, as well as the tech you're using, making sure you know what to look for if you're vetting out technology without the support of an external IT firm, then you also want to just make sure that you've shown what you have done. And in the event that in a worst case scenario where someone maybe sues your firm because information got out, you should have cyber insurance to protect against those things. Of course, insurance companies don't ever want to pay for these things, which is why it's so important to document everything and show your due diligence so they have no reason to deny your claim. Things happen. You can lead horses to water. You can't make them drink. Most of my team is in Arizona and I'm in Seattle, so I can't go down there and see if they locked their computers when they walked away. But I can at least do these pieces so that in a worst case scenario situation, we're covered as a firm.
Christy, we've got a little extra time after this. If it's close to the Phoenix area, I could just go check real quick,
Cool.
Start plugging
Cool.
in some
Everybody's actually sitting in their homes. There's no one in the office right now. So
well, because I'm on an unsecured network, we can't do those addresses. That'd be personal private information,
no, I
right?
won't be
I think
that over this Zoom. But thank you, Matthew. I appreciate the offer.
Linda did have a question though earlier. Did you want to ask it about
Yeah, if somebody hired you, Donnie, and had you come and do a training, I mean, I like the part about Christy just mentioned about emails, and we had one that came to our office that the wording was weird, but it had Sarah's whole everything. It looked like it came from her, and fortunately the person that got it questioned it and it was completely fake. But if somebody hires you to help a firm go through that, do you get a discount on your cyber insurance after that? Or is there a way to get certified so that you're maybe get a little off that? Because it's not cheap to have the cyber insurance.
Yeah, the cyber insurance definitely has, I think it's doubled and quadrupled from what we've been seeing, especially again, kind of post-pandemic. What I will say is what we're seeing on renewals is it's not that it's cheaper, but when you start to not have these things, they won't even renew it with you.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that in the very big. I haven't seen that in the smaller firms yet, but we're seeing, and it's going to eventually trickle down. So that would be the thing I would worry, is not getting your cybersecurity insurance renewed. But the testing that Christy talks about, that was actually one of the tools that we looked at. And Elisa, do you want to explain to them, because I know we have some options on that, you know, and that's we're still an accounting firm, CPA firm, so we try to provide you guys options on what you can. But Elisa, why don't you talk about that one more? Because I know that one is one that often firms are like, do I really need this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one of the things that I would say most firms do not have. It's very rare for me to find one that does currently do phishing testing and training. And of course, it's a little bit harder if you're like a sole, because it's just yourself. And a lot of people feel like, oh, you know, I'm really careful, like I pay attention, you know, I won't click on those emails, but you never know, you know, because even internally for us, you know, we do it monthly actually, and people still fall for certain emails if they're convincing enough. So especially if you're busy, right, during busy season, you're not paying attention as closely as maybe you would have if you're not as busy, then that's when there's a higher chance that you might click on a phishing email. So we always encourage phishing testing and training, especially training for the souls, since they can't test themselves. But we have different options in our offering, you know, that Matthew mentioned. So there's the option to basically run it yourself, or if you just want access to the training, then there's a bunch of training courses, phishing training, that you can have access to. There's an option for us to run it for you, right? So we can create those phishing tests and roll them out. For those that fail, we call them clickers, and they end up in a clicker group, and they get remedial training. Say, hey, you clicked on this, you know, email when you weren't supposed to. So now you have to take additional training to remind yourself of these are the things that you need to look for. Because if for some reason that was an actual, right, phishing email, not a test, then that could be terrible, right? It's like access to data, and it's just like a whole mess. Yeah. So we always encourage at least quarterly testing and training, and then we do a baseline training in the beginning to see, okay, where is everybody at, right, in the firm? And we've actually seen really good results from the very beginning, when there are a whole bunch of clickers, to, you know, like months later, they're like, wow, like people are actually aware and paying attention, and they know what to look for now, and those number of clickers go down.
So you need to change up your clickbait while you're fishing, is what you're saying. Is that right? So, Chrissy, I think I cut you off earlier, that you had something else you wanted to say about real quick.
I forgot one big thing that we do, which is actually probably the easiest lift. Is we created a channel in our Teams environment, or like in Slack, that we just call hardware software. And that's where we talk about any like big issues, like QBO is down or something. But what we also do is we encourage the team, when they come across a phishing attempt that they've caught, to screenshot it and make fun of it in that channel. And so then not only does it like keep it top of mind for everybody, but it also helps people to know, like, oh, I got that one earlier today and I just hadn't checked it yet, right? So then now everybody's on alert. There's phishing out there. So we try to do that when we think about it. Usually it's the more tech savvy among us, but I'm going to raise my hand and tell you guys, 6 months ago, I clicked on a phishing attempt. It was like, I know better. I've been through all the training. I train everybody else. And it was that sophisticated. Even the email address was masked. It looked real. And then it wasn't until after I clicked the button and there was something just a little bit off about the website it took me to, and I was like, oh crap. So I had to send in a ticket to my IT firm and go, guys, I clicked it. So it happens. No one should feel bad if they get caught up in it, because it is getting better and better and better, and that's just how these things work. So we just have to keep staying as vigilant as possible.
They're always staying one step ahead. About 18 months ago, believe it or not, I got a call from my own number, and it was my voice. And it said, hi, this is Richard. And I wanted to reset your password, or your master password for LastPass. Could you go ahead and give that to me? It was me talking to me. It sounded just like me. The sophistication of some of the attacks are
Scary.
better and better and better. Sorry, Lisa.
It wasn't me.
I think Lisa was saying something. Lisa? Nope.
Somebody said that is scary, right? And then Linda asked if I was the one that did that to you. Well, I said no.
I
That was
wouldn't put
not
it past
surprising.
you. I really would not.
See?
Yeah, no, I know the boundaries to some extent. So, but yeah, that's pretty nuts. And then my biggest thing is anytime there's something like that, then I'm hyper paranoid about my computer for the next 3 months that something is like installed, and if it's loading a little slow, now like all this other stuff opens up, which is where having a service would be nice to really make me feel better, because the opportunity cost of the time down of me stressing and trying to figure it out, literally pulling the hard drive, running on a different computer to see it on a different antivirus because I'm just OCD about it. But Richard, you also had another question in the comments, right? Talking about how FTC
I do.
4557.
So the FTC implemented 4557, which is this insanely long list of responsibilities and things that you're supposed to monitor and do on an annual, semi-annual, monthly, weekly, daily basis. And the list is insane. What kind of guidance or advice can either of you provide for folks that are trying to remain safe? They don't necessarily have the resources to do the $1,000 implementation for getting all of the 557 stuff, the 4557 stuff done and taken care of, and then monitored on a monthly basis. Because I've seen costs there just wildly different, where it's thousands of dollars for implementation and then hundreds per computer per month. And it seems to be, just one of those costs that smaller firms, which is who I mostly work with, really can't bear. What suggestions do you have for people who want to stay compliant and legal and not get caught up in the massive amounts of fines that the FTC can put out there to people?
Yeah, let's back up a little bit on that one. So you got two things merged together. So the FTC updated the FTC safeguards rule. That was
Okay.
the one that was updated. That went into effect last June. And then the 4557 that you're referencing is actually the IRS publication 4557, which is the requirements for taxpayer, those that are handling taxpayer information. So
For the clarity.
two different things. If you're doing tax, so you have access to client social security numbers, fees, that kind of stuff, you're going to be subject to both the IRS requirements as well as the FTC. If you're just CAS bookkeeping and you're helping clients with money transfer, so ACH and wires, then you are gonna, even in that situation, you will be subject to the FTC ruling. The other thing to remember about these two, so the IRS one it's more of it's guidance, it's setting their expectations. In effect, it creates a standard, because if a data breach or something were to occur, they're going to come back and say the IRS says you're supposed to have done this. As part of your P10 renewal, you're actually checking a box. I know a lot of us just go, yeah, to check the box so I can renew. You're checking a box that says that you haven't written information security policy that addresses everything that's in 4557. So you're effectively attesting that you're doing everything there. So there's a little bit of that issue, and you might not get renewed again if you were to have a breach and they find out that you're not. So that's part of that risk. The FTC risk is a little different. So, because I don't want to get everyone overly alarmed, the FTC risk, that actually occurs if a client were to file an a complaint with the FTC about your practices that actually resulted in, for example, an ACH fraud where you gave away the client's money, right? And I saw Christy had put a good tip in there, which is get a separate password or passphrase that you have to ask for verbally, because the imitator that Richard mentioned, would not know what that password is. And then on the tax side, it's tied to the Social Security, the handling again of the PII and the Social Security numbers. So the FTC is a little less of a risk, but it still is, as Richard said, quite pervasive. Now there is an exemption to that. If you are handling less than 5,000 records, so you have less than 5,000 Social Security number, bank bank numbers or credit card numbers that you are handling, you are exempted from that. Now, it's a pretty broad way that they count the record. So we haven't seen litigation occur on it yet. So we are telling people to be careful of just going, well, I only have this one client. Well, if the client is a family of 4 and you have, you know, the 2 spouses and the 2 kids, that's 4, not 1. So don't just go, I only do, you know, 100 tax returns, so it's 100. Make sure you're really going down and looking at what is all of that. If you're working with a client, think about, if you're not using something like Forwardly in this case, you've got the vendors like routing numbers to do payments, or you've got customers to pull the money in, right? Those are all records that are going to be subject to this. And if you're handling that on behalf of your client, you're going to include those in your count. So if you are under the 5,000, you still need to do 3 things. One is have the encryption of data in transit and rest. Usually you're relying upon your apps to do that. 2 is going to be multi-factor authentication. And I know all of us hate it. I hate it too. But having that on every single app that you have that lets you do that, put that on if the app has PII in it. So make sure that that's turned on. And then the third one is the secure disposal of information. So, you know, previously we would have talked about that as make sure you're shredding everything. If you want to have fun, maybe if you're with Donna, you can actually go and burn it all. Like that'll be secure as well, right? Create a big fire. Your neighbors might hate you, might be against city regs, but you know, that is secure disposal as long as you make sure it all turns into ash, pulping it in water. But when it starts to come to the computer side, you got to remember that too. You know, there was it feels like it was a long time ago, maybe it was 10 years ago. There was this whole thing about the copiers and the imaging on the copiers because it became digital and the images all got stored. All of your laptops, all of your USBs, if you're using them, if you're allowing emails to go to your phone and you allow clients to email you information with the bank routing numbers or social security numbers or credit card numbers, your phone now is one that all of these now get subject to the secure disposal. And so you need to make sure you're using like a certified e-waste disposal, or you can go, some people pay for it, the break rooms where they give you the sledgehammers and you're like banging on stuff. Like you can go do that. Just grab your own sledgehammer, borrow your neighbors, and, you know, go and have at it and have some fun at it. So those are the 3 things though that you still need to do it. We would say, even if you're not subject to the FTC, you know, the 5,000, you should do that anyway. Those are all best practices in today's world.
So Tori asked a really good question also, you know, what about making payroll tax payments via the EFTPS and the state portals? You know, I guess the key to this, and I'm guessing, is who puts that information of the ACH information in, right? Is it if you have access to make just to click button and make payment, but you don't actually have record of the ACH numbers, would that not be part of the 5,000?
Correct, right? Because you're never getting custody or the ability. So what they're trying to do with the ACH and wire pieces is they're trying to make sure that when that fraudster calls or sends that email and says, hey, I'm in an emergency situation, I need you to transfer this immediately, right? Or we've changed our banking. It could be coming from the vendor side. We've changed our banking information. Please change it to this. Right? If you have that ability to reroute that payment, like on the EFTS side, you don't have that. You know who the recipient is, that's where it's going. If you're sending the payment, that's where we're worried about that fraud occurring.
And what about checking?
I am sending the payments. I'm entering the EIN and the password and all of that directly into the website.
But you're actually registering the payment and they're pulling it from you. You're not saying here, IRS is not giving you their numbers, or state, whoever it is not giving you their number and you're sending it to them, right? That's what we're looking at, is the sending side, where someone else is going to say, oh, don't send it to that bank account. Our bank account changed, send it here. And that's the fraudster's bank account. That's
Okay.
the one we're worried about.
And what about storing of check images then? I know you got a routing number, an account number. That could kick you up over the 5,000 super fast.
Yep. So if you're storing those like deposits, or or your client is doing deposits and they're sending you all of these images. Like we used to tell them, yes, it's a pain, like overlap the check so you can't see the bottom, that routing number, and then just put a post-it or something over the last one. That's what we want you to send us so we can actually see the face, but we don't need to see any of the other stuff.
That's why we go again with Forwardly. That way there's no need for those images, people. So thank you. Oh, wow. Okay, well, you learn something new every single day. Donna, so yes, I wish I could teach every single person as much as I possibly could to not use checks. I wish I could teach my own dad to not use checks. So, and try to switch it all over, but there are some people that still do. And what's interesting is certain institutions, Wells Fargo is the only one that I've ever seen that does this well, where they may have the images on the statements, but they block out the routing and account number and even the signature. I don't know of any other institutions that block that stuff. And as somebody who deals with bank feeds and images and such all the time, I hadn't thought about this part. It's interesting. So, wow. That 5,000 goes away fast.
It does. You just have to, it's a best practice, like he said. I mean,
yeah.
You just want to make sure that you're doing it. And you want to make sure your staff is doing it.
Yeah. And then what about, so you were talking about like disposing of information. I mean, there's one aspect, like we're supposed to keep information for audit purposes for X number of years, right? But how frequently should we be trying to dump sensitive information yet still have what we need to be prepared for an audit? As a person who doesn't do taxes, I don't know.
So the general rule I recommend from a retention standpoint is first, only keep or accept what you need. So that's the first thing. The less you have, like we just talked about blocking out the routing number, routing an account. If you have less, then you have less, even if they do get in, there's less for them to actually get, right? So the first rule is only get what information you have to have. The second one, from a retention standpoint, is only keep and retain what you need as well. So sometimes you need it for immediate processing. For example, what you maybe know is a one-time vendor payment for a client's vendor, and they're like, oh, this is just a one-time thing. If you're not using a system for it, right, use it that one time. Maybe it's printed or however you got it, but don't actually keep it. So sometimes it's getting rid of what you don't need on that. And then as you start to archive and go into files, as we look at digital archiving, the other side of that is maybe make the digital archives harder to get to. So for example, even in our own firm, we have working files that everyone has access to. And then we split out a separate folder that we call our archive folder that only directors in the firm, and I say directors, makes it sound big. We're a 20-person firm. So only we have access to those because we're the only ones that usually have to go back that far in history if something occurs. But at least if one of the team were to have something and they were to get breached, say, that stuff's not going to get affected.
Good points. Very, very good points. Who else may have, we got a lot of people in this meeting, which I appreciate. Thank you, everybody that's here. What questions might you guys have that you've got some people here that are highly knowledgeable. Who else has some questions?
I have a question for my own firm, and that is how do I store credit card authorizations safely? Because we're required to get them to be able to do sales receipts, etc. But then storage. How should you store those? Because you have to keep them on file. And you can't really blank out the numbers and all of that stuff because you have to have the full authorization. But what say you on that?
So ours generally on that one, again, you have to have it. So you do keep it, and then it's just make sure it's more secured. So limit access if you can, because you're really, right, not everyone needs it. Maybe you only need it the first time to set it up. After that, can you put it in somewhere that's more secure with less access? Can you put it into an encrypted folder or something? Or, you know, this is one of the few times I'll go paper. What if you just print it and stick it in a file? Because all you have is the credit card authorizations in that file, and it's just one file off on the side.
That's fair. If I had a printer, I actually bought into the paperless office a lot of years ago. But encrypted folder. So typical cloud storage. Let's use Google Drive as an example. Does it have an additional encryption, like a way to have an encrypted folder, or is that an extra service that you would need to get?
That one's usually an
Does that make
extra
sense?
service. Yep, that one's usually an extra service. And what we usually recommend is having something different than what your primary is.
Okay.
Because if your primary is already getting breached, it's likely that that additional service on your primary is going to be breached, right? So you do kind of want to split that out.
Do you have any suggestions for an
All
additional
common sense.
service for encrypted folders?
Sarah Layla in the comments was saying ShareFile, which personally, I love ShareFile. It's what we always used when I had my team and we needed multiple users, everything else. It was just, it was rock solid. Smart Vault is one that works really well also. But like Donnie, one of the things you guys already taught me, and it goes along with this to some extent, is so Microsoft, I've always been an Office 365 person, and I stepped up my level of subscription past the normal $12 one to professional for $19 or whatever. And I thought that was enough to help me with my cyber protection because it does a good job on like checking links, so forth. But even that, there's a higher level that really would give you more protection. And what you're really saying though is I should still be using a third-party piece to make sure that everything's stored there. And it shouldn't be a syncing. It means it should not live in your Microsoft at all. You need to make sure if you get it there, really use something maybe like Alicia or whatever, so it's not an email anyways. But if you do get it there, you move it over and immediately delete and obliterate any aspect of it. But see, and that's the problem. Then it's on my phone, it's on my laptop, it's on any place like the email goes to. I hate
Yeah,
email.
so realistically, actually, I'm not actually recommending that it be separate. I was actually responding to Richard if he really wanted to. So this becomes the whole risk versus cost thing, right? If you really feel like you need to, then get one of these other solutions, not the ones we've been talking about, because that's all standard client interaction. So I'd put that in your regular, you know, any of those solutions is fine to us. We've worked with firms with all of those. So it's really, if you want to take that additional step, and I really don't want that exposure at all, well, then you really need to move it into something else. And then you're getting into some of the other solutions, which I don't know it offhand because we rarely ever recommend it, to be completely honest with you on that. So, you know, it's about kind of passing, I call it the sniff test, right? Are you comfortable? Does this kind of feel okay for you, right? And if it feels okay for you, that might be okay, because in the end, it's about how much risk you're willing to accept. So if you feel like I'm doing a good job or my team is doing a good job about being aware of these phishing things, we're storing things in the right place, we're identifying when there's problems, then you know, use your regular storage. And that's usually what we see the majority of people do. And so that will be defensible if we're to come litigation, because say, well, how many people actually do that? I would say nobody stores it in this hyper secure thing. We don't know anybody, right? So that would be defensible from that standpoint.
Can I circle back to a question or to something that you mentioned earlier on when Blueprints for Business started, and that was having backups of just simply your data in case something happens. A lot of people, and myself included, when I first started, I was like, well, it's in the cloud. Certainly there's a backup, but I have taken the extra step to share to a different cloud as well, that's constantly updated in real time. And while I feel like that's better, there's still a direct connect link so that it can sync. Is that just, am I just throwing money away doing it that way? Am I opening myself up by having that direct link? Should I do it manually? I'm not sure the best protocol for doing that. You piqued my interest when you said have a backup. Because I always thought it was enough.
So there's two things in there. So let me do one part. I'm going to ask Elisa to do the second part. So the first part of that is just this whole concept of duplication, right? So if you're on a single computer and I'm connected to this file set and I'm connected to that file set, even if they're different, if your computer was breached and your computer has access to both of those, they're both still at risk. Previously, before we had all this cloud and where cloud was dominant, we would have said, have it on your laptop and then have it also in the cloud. And most of the attacks at that time didn't go out to the cloud.
Okay.
Now it goes and it looks, where are you? And then it goes and attacks everything. So really what you're looking at in this case is having a separate backup. And that's what I'm going to ask Elisa to talk about, because that was one of the things when we talked to a lot of people, they didn't have that second backup. It was kind of like you started, oh, isn't Google backing it up for me? Isn't Microsoft backing it up for me? Yes, they are, but there's limitations to that, which Elisa can talk to.
Right. So a lot of people have the default backups, which only have like a certain retention period. So that's one of the challenges. And then so having that separate backup solution allows you to have a longer period of time, and then also the point in time, which is something that we found a lot of the default backups don't have. So if you want to restore, to a certain time of day, maybe, or like a lot more specific, then that's not included in the typical default backup. So that's one of the advantages of having that separate backup solution. So you not only have the additional one in place just in case, but then if you need to get to that more granular level, then that's what those type of backups can provide as well.
Thank you. I feel like sometimes I feel like I've got it down, and sometimes I feel like I have a thousand more questions about this very topic. It's dreadfully confusing. And for people that are just trying to run their business, there are so many facets to security that we have to think about, and it's really hard to navigate. So you guys are doing a wonderful job on helping the navigation process of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, with that, one of the things I asked Elisa to do, in prep for this was, what are some of the things that, or what are the most common things that when you're talking to, especially souls or these micro firms, what are some of the common things that they either ask or they find out after talking to you, where they're like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, I thought I was covered and I'm not?
Okay, yeah. So we already talked about the phishing testing and training. I would say that's probably at the top of the list, where a lot of people don't really think about it, or they feel like they're comfortable enough. And then the policy itself. So I have talked with firms where they have checked the box, but they don't really have a policy. So they're like, well, I downloaded a template. Does that count? So like, well, you kind of need to personalize that, right? So I help them understand, what the policy is for and how it should align with, what they have in place, their security that they have in place. Password management, which I touched on before, that's a huge one that a lot of firms do not have, password management solutions. And I think they feel comfortable because they're used to just remembering their passwords, but then they're not necessarily thinking about complexity requirements, or what if a password was exposed. A lot of the password management solutions, they can provide that visibility, right, to let you know if there was a password that you need to change. So that type of thing. The antivirus is typically whatever comes with your computer. instead of being like more advanced. And then the proactive monitoring that I mentioned earlier of the patching and any types of device issues, that's typically not in place as well. So I think it's more of a sharing more around being proactive on the management of security and thinking about like what are the additional security measures that can be put in place, like basically layering, right? Because you want to layer, because if for some reason an attacker gets in through one thing, then you want something behind that, right, to provide the additional protection just in case. So then that way they never get to the data, right, your client's data. So kind of building that package of solutions in order to provide that peace of mind, to have that in place is what I've found, I'm able to share with the different firms.
Thank you for that. I want to dig into something else, and it's something that's rather confusing for a lot of people. We see, so I threw in the chat, how do you feel about Bitdefender? You said we haven't seen any problems with that. But Bitdefender also has antivirus, and then another level, I don't remember what that level is called, and then internet security. Why would those companies break that down like that? Why would internet security just not be the product rather than just, because antivirus is not covering, it's only covering traditional virus scenarios and virus behaviors, correct? Internet security is going a little bit further. I am going to step in it if I try to even say what it does. But what do you recommend? Because Elisa, you nailed it. Most people use the free antivirus software that came with their computer, and it's usually garbage. Let's just be honest. What do you recommend? The top level internet security packages, the midpoint, or just the antivirus?
So we recommend, we actually have in our package, it's an endpoint protection solution that works kind of hand in hand with, I think it actually serves as an antivirus. Donnie can probably speak to this, but not Ken. But what it does is the combination of the two basically keeps an eye on everything and watches out for ransomware and any of those types of attacks. And they actually have a team behind that will address those risks and resolve any issues that they see, before anything horrible happens. As far as the different levels, I'm gonna ask Donnie to help me out on this one.
I'll explain why. So the way that we look at cybersecurity is it's an onion. So think of your data in the middle, right? And that's what the attacker is trying to get to. And what you're doing is you're putting all these layers like an onion, right? So that to prevent attackers from getting in. So sometimes they'll come in directly. So if it was a USB drive, for example, that you found and you're like, oh, look, this USB drive, let me figure out whose it is. And I plug it into my computer, right? All of this internet security won't protect you from any of that because you're going directly into your computer. And so you're hopefully your antivirus actually catches that. With all these other layers, it's what are the different attack vectors? If it's a phishing attack, it's actually coming through the browser. So how do I protect you from going to the wrong places on the browser? If it's a mobile attack, to get your password on your mobile device, so then we need something that's protecting the mobile device, because maybe you get an email, the phishing attack on your mobile device, which is different from your computer, right? Which is different from I'm accessing Gmail and I'm doing something else there. So that's a different attack vector than your typical one that's coming down into Outlook. So that's what they're really doing. And it comes back to the whole, what they're trying to do is give you solutions that are looking at where do you think you have risk? And we're going to give you, if you think you have very little risk, we're going to give you just the antivirus because that's all you're willing to pay for, right? So it's basically not mandating that everyone be at this bigger risk one. If you want to just do this, then you can do that. And again, if it ever came to litigation or investigation, they're going to go, that's not the business standard. The business standard is that you're getting the whole.
Security. Thank you. That shed some good light on that. Matthew, we've got about a minute and a half. I want to make sure that we thank Forwardly and let you wrap things up. So
Before we do that, Donnie, would you please put a link for you to how people should be connecting with you, whatever works best, into the comments. There's obviously so much more that could be talked about through this conversation. We could keep going and going, but if you could please share a link where people could connect. One of the biggest things I'm taking away from this whole thing, and it wasn't planned this way, but as I am proud to be using Forwardly, it really kind of solves some of that 5,000, pieces of information that if you're sending out the request for payment to somebody and they're filling in all that for you, you don't have that information from that side. And you can receive back through Forwardly. It's a great way to go. You're avoiding the check images, you're avoiding all that type of stuff. So again, it was an unplanned plug, but I'm enjoying it. So Jane, thank you very much for being our sponsor with this. It's been a lot of fun. We have, so everybody's aware, next month, we're doing horror stories from the general ledger. Ooh, Halloween themed wise. So we need everybody to come with a fun horror story. People's identities redacted, for type thing, but we want to hear like some of the fun stories. Let's have a fun time with it and hear some of your horror stories. So any last comments from anybody?
well, I just want to say, Jane just said that the spooky costumes are optional. I'm going to say they should be mandatory. It's a perfect tie-in, Jane.
Yes. So,
Peer pressure is wrong, Richard.
Oh, right.
well, to those of you that we will be seeing soon at Appy Camp, we look forward to it. And for those who will not be there, keep an eye out. I will be commentating and sharing, doing everything else. And last but not least, just wishing you all a very successful week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Tony